The skeletal remains of a once majestic South American lion lay motionless under the scorching sun in the wilds of the Pantanal, a vast wetland in western Brazil. Its breathing was so faint that Dr. Amari Johnson, a black veterinarian and wildlife conservationist, initially thought the animal was dead. Every rib was visible through the lion's dull, matted fur. Its once powerful body had withered down to skin and bones, a stark testament to weeks of starvation. While leading an anti-poaching patrol through the arid parts of the Pantanal, local guide Juan Ribeiro spotted the animal lying still beside a dried-up watering hole. What they witnessed defied all logic. A fully grown male lion, around 8 years old, lay alone in a desolate area, untouched by human presence. It was so weak it couldn't lift its head. In over 20 years of conservation work, I've never seen a lion in such a state and still clinging to life, Dr. Johnson later shared. The lion's eyes were sunken deep into its skull, and its once proud golden mane had become a tangled, filthy mess. Its body was covered in open wounds, likely from lying motionless for days, invaded by insects and bacteria. Its breathing was shallow and labored, each gasp a struggle. Johnson knelt beside the dying creature, bracing himself for the instinctive fury or fear typical of wild predators. But what happened next left him stunned. The lion slowly turned its head toward him, and their eyes met. It wasn't the threatening glare of a wild beast, but a pleading gaze, the look of a living being who somehow knew that hope had just arrived. "It was like it was begging me to save it," Johnson recalled. "I've worked with hundreds of big cats, but I've never seen a look like that, a look so full of awareness and human-like desperation." The lion's condition was far more critical than anything Dr. Amari Johnson had ever encountered. It was severely dehydrated, so much so that its gums had turned pale white, a clear sign that its blood circulation was failing. Its body temperature was alarmingly low, despite the stifling heat of the dry season Pantanal. Johnson estimated that the animal hadn't eaten in at least 3 weeks and had gone without water for several days. What worried him most were the lion's hind legs, which appeared to be completely paralyzed, possibly due to spinal trauma or a blow from another large animal. Unable to move, it was utterly helpless in the unforgiving wilderness. Faced with the animal's fragile hold on life, Johnson had to make a decision that went beyond any professional protocol. According to standard veterinary procedure, he should have euthanized the lion to end its suffering. But something in its eyes, a faint, flickering spark, kept him from doing so. "Every instinct, every logical thought told me it wasn't going to survive," he shared. "But my gut told me it deserves a chance to fight." As the last light of day faded across the flooded grasslands of the Pantanal, Johnson quickly established an IV line and began emergency fluid therapy. Throughout the procedure, the lion remained still, offering no resistance, as if it understood that this human was trying to save it. It wasn't submission, it was connection, a silent agreement between wild creature and healer. Dr. Johnson administered painkillers, antibiotics, and electrolytes, while João radioed in a call for a rescue helicopter from a conservation station more than 200 kilometers away. But night fell too quickly. With poor visibility and unsafe flying conditions, it was impossible to transport the animal. Johnson made a difficult choice. He would stay the night beside the lion. As darkness settled over the wetlands, the temperature dropped sharply. Johnson took an emergency thermal blanket from the vehicle and laid it over the lion's emaciated body. Then he sat beside it, using his own body to shield it from the bitter night winds sweeping through the tall grasses. That night, he never took his eyes off the animal, and the lion never looked away from him. Each time he checked the IV line or gently adjusted the blanket, the lion let out a low, soft sound, almost a quiet moan. It wasn't a growl of anger, nor a cry of pain. It was a breath, like a thank you. A gentle sound, like a house cat brushing against its owner's leg. Quiet, but full of life. It was surreal, Dr. Amari Johnson later recalled. There I was, alone in the flooded plains of the Pantanal, beside a dying wild lion. It should have been afraid of humans, maybe even lashed out from the pain. But instead, it lay quietly next to me, as if it trusted me completely. Somehow Johnson sensed that the animal understood, not through reason but through some deep instinct, that he was trying to save it. The rescue helicopter arrived at dawn. The Pantanal was still cloaked in thick mist beneath the bluish-gray sky of early morning. Evacuation under such conditions was extremely risky. Johnson had to sedate the lion on the spot, all while keeping the IV line active, an essential lifeline to keep it from crashing mid-air. The flight to Pantanal Norte Animal Hospital, the nearest field veterinary facility, was tense and urgent. As the helicopter descended, Johnson radioed the hospital's lead veterinarian, Dr. Sofia Mendes, a seasoned expert in wildlife medicine. But when she heard the request for emergency surgery on a severely emaciated, possibly paralyzed male lion, she was skeptical. "Amari, you're talking about a lion that hasn't eaten in 3 weeks and hasn't had water in days." Mendez's voice came through the radio, barely audible over the thrum of the rotors. "Even if we manage to save it, there's no way it can be returned to the wild. It won't be able to hunt, let alone defend itself." However, when the helicopter landed and Johnson carried the lion out on a stretcher, every doubt she had was eclipsed by professional instinct. Dr. Mendes saw a dying animal. That much was clear, but it was also clear that Johnson's overnight efforts had worked. The lion's breathing had steadied, its body temperature was under control, and the IV line remained intact. But what stunned the medical team most was the lion's demeanor. Despite being in an unfamiliar environment, surrounded by people, medical equipment, harsh lights and noise, it showed no signs of panic or aggression. Instead of lashing out, it simply looked around quietly, its gaze eventually settling on Johnson's face, as if searching for reassurance. Its response was completely contrary to what we know about wild lion behavior, Dr. Mendes later wrote in her medical report. It allowed us to touch it, to lift it onto the operating table, even to place the anesthesia mask, without any sign of resistance. And at that very moment, under the glare of surgical lights, amid the beeping machines and hurried hands, a wild lion, once a symbol of strength, entrusted its life to humankind. "It's as if it knows we're trying to save it." Those were the first words Dr. Sofia Mendes uttered after reviewing the lion's full diagnostic results. The tests revealed severe trauma to its spine, possibly from a fall from height or a life-or-death fight with another male during mating season. The injury had completely paralyzed its hindquarters, and the loss of mobility had triggered a cascade of complications: malnutrition, internal infections, and strain on the heart and kidneys. Its chance of survival was estimated at less than 10%. The orthopedic and neurological surgery lasted 8 hours, a medical feat never before attempted at Pantanal Norte. And throughout the entire operation, Dr. Amari Johnson never left the room for even a second. Even under anesthesia, the veterinary team observed that whenever Johnson placed his hand on the lion's body, its heart rate stabilized and its breathing eased, as if it sensed the safety of his presence. When the anesthesia began to wear off and the lion slowly regained consciousness, the first thing it did was turn its head, eyes scanning the room and stopping the moment they met Johnson's face. The room fell silent. No words were needed. Its gaze conveyed a single, unmistakable message. you're still here." Johnson named the lion Tao, a sacred term for lions in the native Guateau language. Tao's recovery was anything but simple. It required constant monitoring and 24/7 care in a tightly controlled environment. Johnson took an extended leave from all professional duties to remain at the center and personally oversee every step of the rehabilitation process. He set up a small folding bed right in the recovery room. For 3 consecutive weeks, he slept beside Tao, tracking every vital sign, every sign of progress, but more than anything, simply being there for the creature on its journey back to life. And then, something miraculous began to happen. Tao didn't just survive, he began to show behaviors never before documented in a wild lion. He was acutely aware of Johnson's presence, and even his absence. Each time Johnson stepped out, Tao became visibly restless, breathing faster and letting out low growls, as if calling for him. But whenever Johnson returned, Tao would emit soft, snuffling sounds, almost like a joyful sigh. And though still weak, he would try to nuzzle his heavy head into Johnson's hand. Not instinct, not trained behavior, but attachment, primal, pure, and deeply emotional. "It's like watching a family bond form day by day," whispered Nurse Jennifer Mora, who was directly caring for Tao as she observed from the control room. He responds to Dr. Johnson's voice, calms down the moment he's touched by him. It's as if his presence gives the lion a sense of safety, something science can't explain. As Tao's health gradually improved, his true personality began to emerge. Though a wild lion, once the apex predator of the Pantanal, he displayed an unexpected gentleness, especially toward Johnson and the medical team. He didn't growl, didn't act aggressively. On the contrary, he learned to accept the daily physical therapy sessions for his paralyzed hind legs. Somehow, through primal instinct, Tao seemed to understand that those uncomfortable movements were helping him heal. And then came the 4th week, bringing with it a miracle. That day, Dr. Johnson was conducting a routine check in the recovery room. He bent down as usual, checking for muscle reflexes, gently calling Tao's name. Suddenly, the impossible happened. Tao's tail gave a slight twitch, and it didn't stop there. His hind paw gently curled in what should have been an impossible reflex. The room fell completely silent. Then, as if in unison, everyone turned to look at each other. No one could believe what they had just seen. "That's impossible," Dr. Sofia Mendez murmured as she reread the spinal scan. The type of injury Tao suffered usually leads to permanent paralysis, but he just responded. She couldn't offer any explanation beyond an indomitable will to live, and an extraordinary bond between Tao and Johnson, something perhaps beyond the reach of medical science. A video of that very moment was uploaded to social media by an intern. In it, Tao, still frail, was seen trying to move his hind leg, while Johnson sat beside him, softly encouraging him. Within hours, the video went viral. Millions of shares, hundreds of thousands of emotional comments poured in from around the world. The image of a lion once left for dead in the merciless wild, now fighting to stand with the help of a human, it touched hearts across the globe. From every continent, donations began flooding in to support the rehabilitation center, fund modern therapy equipment, and sustain Tao's specialized care. Letters, drawings, even prayers were sent for the lion, and the man who hadn't abandoned him in his darkest hour. 6 months later, Tao was no longer the helpless creature lying on the ground with hollow eyes. He could walk, strong, majestic, full of life, like the adult male lion he was meant to be. He could run, slower than before, but steady. He could roar, deep, resonant, and full of pride. Tao's life, once thought to have ended on the unforgiving plains of the Pantanal, had now become a symbol of hope. But what was to come next, the moment that would make the entire world stop and listen, was something no one could have foreseen. After Tao had defied the most pessimistic prognoses, Dr. Amari Johnson began planning the next chapter of life for the creature he now considered family. At a research site bordering the wetlands of the Pantanal, he commissioned the construction of a special sanctuary, designed specifically to meet the unique needs of Tao, a wild lion who had once been paralyzed and could no longer be safely returned to the wild. The plan was simple: to create an ideal retirement home where Tao could live out the rest of his days in peace, free from threats, whether from humans or nature, that had once nearly claimed his life. A spacious area with grasslands, a pond, trees, and shaded spots, enclosed by a secure but open fence. Everything was built so Tao could roam freely in a semi-wild environment, with medical care readily available when needed. But Tao had other plans. On a warm October morning, sunlight filtered softly through the mist blanketing the ground. "As usual, Doctor." Johnson entered the care area to check on Tao's health and spend some time with him. He brought a small bag of snacks, a few therapy tools, and his notebook. But this time, Tao didn't just rise to greet him. He walked toward him, slowly but deliberately. And then, in an utterly unexpected gesture, Tao gently lowered his head and closed his powerful jaws around Johnson's wrist, not biting, not holding tight like a show of dominance, but with precision and tenderness, just like a lioness carrying her cub, causing no pain, no harm. Then Tao silently turned and walked toward the gate of the enclosure. He wasn't agitated. He didn't pace or struggle. He walked with the calm assurance of a being who knew exactly what he was doing. At the gate, he released Johnson's wrist and sat down. Eyes fixed on him, no growl, no urgency, just a look, as if to say, "Trust me." Johnson stood motionless. He knew what was right according to science, according to wildlife management protocols. But he also knew that look, that same gaze he'd first seen in the mud and dry sands of the Pantanal, when a dying creature had entrusted its life to him. And now, once again, Tao was asking not for life, but for freedom. Against every procedure, every theory, and every safety warning, Dr. Amari Johnson opened the gate. What happened next was captured by the center's surveillance cameras and quickly streamed live to the world. Millions watched. Tao didn't run. He didn't destroy anything. He didn't panic. He simply walked beside Johnson, shoulder to shoulder, as if they were walking together. Two beings, one who had once saved a life and one who had once collapsed, now leaving the enclosure side by side, heading toward the wide-open grasslands beyond where nature awaited. No cages, no leashes, only absolute trust. Tao didn't just want to step out of the gate, he wanted to lead the way. Dr. Amari Johnson soon realized that the lion wasn't merely exploring new territory or looking for shelter. He was heading toward a specific place, one that seemed to hold meaning not only for him, but perhaps for his kind as well. Two beings, a man and a lion, walked together across the grass-choked fields and dense scrublands of the Pantanal, where sunlight spilled like gold over the sun-scorched blades. Tao paused from time to time, glancing back to check that Johnson was still following. No leash, no barriers, just absolute trust. Above them, a news helicopter circled, capturing footage never before seen in the history of conservation. A man walking through the wild, side by side with a full-grown lion who had once hovered at the brink of death, now leading the way like an old friend. Finally, after nearly 2 miles, their destination emerged. A small pride of lions, 3 females and 4 cubs, huddled beneath the sparse shade of some low, spindly palm trees. Emaciated and parched, they growled softly in anxiety but didn't flee. Johnson froze. It was them, the very pride he had tracked during past patrols in the area where he'd found Tao barely clinging to life months before. Tao stepped forward. He positioned himself between the pride and the scrub's edge, where danger could lurk, and released a series of deep, low growls. Not threatening, but conveying something. Then he turned and looked at Johnson, eyes calm and full of peace. The lionesses didn't respond the way anyone might have expected. They didn't panic, didn't attack. Instead, they accepted the presence of a human. From just a few meters away, Johnson could see their eyes, deep, hollow, desperate. Wild mothers struggling to keep their cubs alive through a brutal dry season. And that was the moment Johnson understood. Tao hadn't brought him here out of gratitude. He was asking for help. Not for himself, but for his family. In the weeks that followed, a small-scale relief mission was swiftly launched. In partnership with local conservation organizations, Johnson set up a water station, installed solar-powered pumps, and provided temporary food supplies to help the pride survive the harsh season. Tao never left his side. He became a living bridge between 2 worlds, wild nature and human compassion. The footage of a once-abandoned lion now leading a human back to aid his pride became the most viewed wildlife video in social media history. Dr. Jane Goodall, legendary primatologist, called it the most extraordinary interspecies expression of emotion I've ever witnessed. Eventually, for safety reasons, Tao was brought back to the research facility, the place where he had once fought to live. But the bond between him and Johnson could no longer be contained by fences. Tao lived another 7 years. In his remaining time, he became a living symbol of conservation, featured in education campaigns and global fundraising efforts. The image of Tao, not as a roaring predator, but as a gentle giant walking beside the black doctor who had saved his life, helped raise millions of dollars for wildlife preservation. In the winter of 2019, Tao passed away, peacefully, without pain. And Dr. Johnson was there beside him, hand resting on his back, whispering a final message. Thank you for letting me walk beside you. Tao's legacy isn't just a tale of survival. It's powerful proof that emotion, will, and gratitude are not exclusive to the human species. Tao taught us this. Consciousness doesn't begin or end with language. Intelligence is not confined to species, and kindness can redeem an entire wild world. At Tao's memorial, Dr. Johnson said, Tao didn't just survive. He used his second chance to help those weaker than himself. And I think, if there's another life after this one, any human would be proud to say they learned that from a lion.